a gift from the chamber for
No, it's a good
your
idea.
anniversary.
I'll bring that up.
I think you should,
Yeah.
absolutely. So Mr. Gillis has graciously taken some time out of his normal work schedule to come talk to you today. We have been looking at the clues that you made, and we were confounded. We could not, none of us here could figure it out, although we thought we had some pretty good ideas along the way. So I know that we would appreciate some explanation of some of them, and I know you have some history to share, ideas along the way. And then they know that they are going to do some sort of, we're doing a miniature version of a hunt with homecoming week coming up. So in order for you to reflect your understanding of the information that was shared with you today, and remember, one of our skills and objectives with this class is speaking and listening. So you are getting a grade on your ability to listen to Mr. Gillis with respect and attention, and you are also getting a grade on how well you listened and understood the information. You are going to get a chance to do speaking today in the form of the question and answers session that we're getting. So I have an organizer for you. Real quickly, I want to explain. On the far left-hand side, anything that he shares that you think, wow, that's kind of cool, I didn't know that, or that's interesting information about what Mr. Gillis has encountered in issues, and especially this year there was an issue. Something that's interesting, you want to write that down. Good advice that he shares with you about making clues or establishing our hunt that you want to record so that you can use it for later goes in the middle. Really, that makes me wonder. That's where you write down your questions that you're going to ask Mr. Gillis. And down at the bottom, after all is said and done, hopefully you're inspired to start thinking about our own homecoming hunt and where you might have some clues or some suggestions. So I will let you have your space. Thank you.
Hi, guys. I apologize to your infamous cameraman because I might move around a little bit, so we'll see how well he handles that. I'm coming off a cold here, so hopefully I can keep my voice up. Mrs. Stolz mentioned how people, what they think, how they comment. The explanations of the clues came out yesterday, and usually there's always a fallout. Now last night, after a Marigold Festival Committee meeting, a lady confronted me when we were out at Corey's afterwards, and thank goodness she shared some of her thoughts and interpretations, which were kind of interesting. She finished by calling me a genius, which made me feel good. This morning I get an email forwarded from the chamber from someone who was just the opposite, who told me it's time to retire and called me an idiot. So, you know, you can't keep everybody happy, and you have to be prepared for that when you do this hunt of your own. As part of the history, I thought I'd share with you a little bit. When I started this in 1988, for the 10 years before I did it, this was really the medallion. It looked the same. This one they put the year on, because what they used to do is a person would find the medallion and they'd bring it down to the Chamber of Commerce. In the back it says return to Chamber of Commerce, and then they claimed their prizes. It was not the prize choice you have now, which is either a cruise or a trip to Vegas for two. It was a series of prizes donated by generous local businesses. Well, the thing was, they grabbed their prizes, but the thing they were always disappointed in was the fact that they couldn't keep this, because we just reuse it every single year. So we started having these made and leave these with people. We found out quickly that this was made by Caterpillar, and actually it looks and feels like plastic, but it's a composite material that has some metal in it. So the concern immediately was about metal detectors, because there's people out looking with that. So we changed it a little bit to still be plastic. The thought then came up, we put Pepsi, our sponsor, in here. The thought came up that, you know, people really want to keep this. This is their most valued prize of the hunt. So we decided to check with local artists to put together their own medallion. And you'll have to decide what you want to have when you have your hunt. They started making different creations. This is the 1996 one. This is the biggest one ever except for this year's, which was made of glass and probably the same size but also a little bit heavier. When it comes to hiding it, it kind of limits your possibilities. So we found a local artist, and this is just one of several I had, and this was a lady by the name of Linda Travis who made a lot of different ones. It was really great artwork on this. There was the voice again. And we continued that until the idea came up a few years ago that why don't we get Pekin High involved and the art department involved. So you have some of your fellow students who submit to the Marigold Committee their ideas, and the committee then decides. So that's what happens. This year's was done with, at first it was done with glass, and the final product was with glass, but there was actually little bits of copper in it. So we had to have it redone because of the metal detector issue. And that's the one that's gone missing. And to answer a question, because I'm always asked every day, what do you think happened to the old one, or has it been found? And the answer is it hasn't been found. It's still out there somewhere. Our thinking is that it was probably an animal of some kind that grabbed it, took off with it. It was pretty big and pretty heavy, but more than likely that's what happened. It got lost in the sense it went missing. We had to react pretty quickly, and it's kind of a lesson in how you have to respond in a crisis. And I used one of the old medallions. I had a second one of these, and this is what we actually then re-hid for the person then that found it. We had to put it in a different spot, not the same spot, but a different spot, same location, because the fear was that someone was pulling a prank on us and found the medallion, was just kind of keeping it and waiting to see how we responded. The thought was, you put this one back in the same exact spot, it's keeping them from going out and doing it again. So it was in a little bit different spot. No one ever came forward. Believe me, you find this thing, and you're going to call me within seconds. I mean, you're excited. You want to claim your prize. So the thought that someone took it and just hung on to it and then would have taken it and kept it and never claimed their prize just wouldn't happen. So someday, somewhere, we talked last night at the meeting, I'll probably put out a reward. If you ever find the old one, $25, $50 reward, it's yours, because I'd just like to know what happened to it. To give credit where credit's due, Bailey Underwood, that is a senior that made this year's medallion, felt for the guy that got this one and didn't get the original, so she actually on her own made him another one, so he's going to end up with 2 medallions. But he worked the clues, worked them well, and figured it out. Just a little bit about the clue explanations. I did 2 things that were different than I've ever done in the past. I always use some kind of reference, but I used 2 different things. One in clue 6 was a reference to songs, to music. And there was a song I was trying to think of because the location is a former Girl Scout camp. So I wanted something that referred to that. It couldn't say Girl Scouts, that would give it away. Girl Scouts would go there, it's a camp, you'd stay overnight. So I just thought of the song, Good Night Ladies. It's an old song. I looked it up in Google and I found a soundtrack it was part of, and then it was part of a play, a movie, so I referred to the Music Man. That song was in it, and there was another one that was called A Sadder But Wiser Girl, again a reference to the Girl Scout camp. No one really picked up on that. There were some other references, and it's a valuable lesson there, because if you look at that list, there was one song called Marion the Librarian, so I knew people would go and pretty much ransack the library, which is kind of what happened. Usually I can't show my face at the library for 2-3 weeks because I know they all hate me there. And then 76 trombones. I knew they'd go to any school in the area that may have a music department. But there was those 2 songs that actually applied. What I was also trying to do, if you read the clues, there's a series of numbers in there. And what I thought of doing was use a telephone keypad. Now, if you look on a cell phone or a home telephone, you see the keypad. Of course, there's numbers, but each number has letters. So if I gave you a series of numbers, you looked at the corresponding letters, you'd want to kind of pick them apart and put them together and unscramble them and maybe come out with a word. The word that I was spelling out was Sodweddle. It was the Sodweddle Program Center out of McNaughton Park. I knew that would be a tough one. I knew it would take time for people to figure out. That's why in the last clue, I really fine-tuned that and heated it up to see how maybe people could figure it out. Well, that clue came out at noon, and it was found at almost 1:15, so people figured it out, and they were that good. But those are the type of things you have to work with when putting a hunt together. Any questions about this year's hunt? Anybody look? Anybody's family go out and look? Okay. Did you have any ideas where it was? None at all? Okay. Yep.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Is Pepsi like you guys' only sponsor that you guys have on it?
Right. We used to have, again, a lot of local businesses I might have 20, 30 different prizes. Some would give a T-shirt or a cup or something like that. And during the Marigold Festival, we asked so many businesses to do so much for us. The idea was if we could get one major sponsor and give one major prize, then we can tell local businesses to help others and not have to expect them to help us. And it's worked out real well. Pepsi makes it possible, and it's been 25 years. We've had these trips that have really been pretty popular with people. Anybody else? Well, I brought with me this year's hunt. Everything is right here. If you wanted to figure out this year's hunt, it was all right here. And here's how I put it together. I go out and pick the spot. I have 2 or 3 locations in mind, so I start with the first one that I'm thinking of. I go out to the general location, and first of all, I look to see if it's accessible, if it's safe to get to. Then I started looking at things around me to determine, is there good references or clue references to use, good stuff to throw into the clues. And then I'll look for a particular spot. And once I find that spot, if it still fits, I still like it, say, okay, this is the spot. I take out a little notebook, and I start quickly writing down things that I see around me. And it may be a general description of the area, or it could be specific things. And sometimes it's things that if a person thinks of while they're looking at the clue at home might get them there, or it's something where you have to actually be there to figure it out. And then I write them all down and list them. I put them in 3 columns, one that describes the Sodwittle Program Center, one that described the grounds around it, and then another one where I started listing possible themes, things I could write about that maybe people would pick up on. And then you sit down, you start writing. What I did is, and I always do this, I'll write the clues, usually just 6 of them, and I'll write them in an hour and a half or so. And I finish up, I put them aside, and I just forget about them. I always make sure I write what I was thinking, because I sometimes trick myself. I'll forget what I was referring to. Then I come back in 2 or 3 weeks and take a look at the clues, and now see how they feel, see if I still like them, and start doing my rewrites. Usually they stay fairly the same, but I'll make some adjustments. Then what I do is I have a group of people called my bouncers. And what I do is I bring them in to bounce the clues off them. So I'll say, here's the clue, here's where it's going to be, here's my clues, what do you think? And they do 2 things. First of all, I want them to tell me if they think it's too easy, too hard. But then they look for something that's called unintended consequences. Meaning I put a word in there that had a certain meaning to me, but to them it might mean something else. So when you're putting your hunt together, what you want to do is collaborate as a group, because one of you may see something one way and it's perfect, it fits, it's tricky, but to someone else they say, well, to me, I see it this way. And if I see it that way, that to me gets me there quicker. So you got to look for something you put in there. The lady I mentioned I ran into last night with the clue about Music Man, and one of the songs is Marion the Librarian. She told me, well, she read that, and she went to the library and thought, can't be here, it's too easy. And she had always thought it was down around the lagoon and the pavilion. So she walked around there, and there's a light standard there that has a dedication. It's usually in memory of or honor of someone. It was to memory of someone by the name of Marion somebody. So she was certain it was right there. She tore through bushes and cut herself up and all that. And my comment to her was, that's good, but that's not what I intended. It's just a coincidence. But that seems to happen every year, that someone reads it a different way, and it really applies, but it really wasn't what I was thinking. Because oftentimes I use what I call misdirection, which means I know they'll be thinking this, but I'm going to take them here first. And here's the way to get to where it's hidden, but maybe I'll take them here first, then I'll take them there, which then leads them there. And but in her case, I had no idea there was a light standard with Marion, but it worked. And a lot of times people will contact me and say, I was here, I swore it was here, this fit, and this fit. It was perfect. And they were absolutely right. It just wasn't the spot. So when meeting with the bouncers, we look for those things. Will they read it different? Sometimes we'll say, like this year, clue number 3 was originally clue 4. They felt there was more in 3 than in 4, so I moved 4 up to 3. And then I always do those rewrites. A lot of times the clues that you end up seeing, I've changed up to a minute or 2 before I release them. There's a word I don't like, or I'm thinking of something else, and I just change it. Or I have an inspiration to go a different way. The one with the telephone keypad, I was going to do differently. And then I was reading a book this summer, a spy novel, and the genius in the book was somebody who had a phone number or a series of numbers, realized it was a phone sequence, and they tried the number, they called all over the country, it just didn't fit. And this guy, who's smarter than everybody else, said, well, maybe it's not a phone number, maybe it's the letters that are on a phone pad. And he started working with them, and it got him the answer, got him to the bad guys. So it was an idea that I chose to use, and that author's name was actually the password that was with this year's medallion, and still known by no one because no one found that medallion. But that's where I came up with the idea. So then I release the clues, and I make the changes and the rewrites. What I'll do is I have a group that I call my spotters. And what they'll do is drive around town and see where people are at. So I get calls that, hey, there's a ton of people here, or a bunch over there. And then I know whether they're getting it or not. But they'll always drive by the general location. And it might be, gosh, there's 40, 50 people here, there's 20, 30 people here. They go by the spot and they'll tell me there's nobody there. So I know they're just not getting it. And that tells me how much I heat it up a little bit or pull back a little bit and fine-tune and adjust it. And they just really, there was then a handful of people there, and ironically, when I changed that 8th clue, there were people there right away, and even after it was found, Park Police called me to confirm it was found because people were starting to come there in droves. That's how quick they are and how quick they figured it out. But here's some advice to how you put this together. And you do it as you want. My approach to this 25 years ago, and kind of still is, and the way to picture this is look at your hunt as putting together a jigsaw puzzle. And to where nobody knows what the picture will be except you guys. Now, if you're doing that, if that's what you're going to do, then the first question is, well, what pieces do we release first versus those that are later? What you may want to do, what I always did, is figure, I'm going to do the border pieces. Border pieces will tell you whether it's a big puzzle or a small puzzle. But they really don't tell you anything. The only thing they'll tell you is it's a puzzle. Then what I might do is you look at all the pieces laid out and start picking ones in an order you think will kind of get people closer and closer to it. So as an example, let's say you had a piece that showed hair. Well, maybe instead, though, what you're trying to show is it's puzzled with an animal. Well, if you use something that just shows hair, no one's going to figure it out. They know it's hair, but they don't know if it's human or an animal. So you could use that earlier in a clue if you want to let them know there's some living thing in it. Then what you might release is an eye, but if you release an eye, you got to remember that eye pretty quickly if it's human or an animal, or is it a dog or a cat. So you've got to be careful how you release that. Maybe it's an animal on a farm, so instead you release a little bit of barn siding or something to that effect. So when people are looking at it, they may think first, well, maybe you want to give them one where they know, well, it's obviously a barn, it's something on a farm. Or you just want to have an animal and let them know, here's the animal. They don't know it's a farm. So you have to carefully decide what pieces you have and then what pieces you put together over time. The other thing you do is, remember you're putting together a puzzle, but you're not giving people pieces, so you're giving them words that describe those pieces. So you have to come up with ways where you can find words that say something in a lot of different ways. And that sometimes is the biggest challenge. So, for example, if you want to describe something that was blue, you can come up with blue, but then remember that, well, we hit it near a place that's blue, and how many blue places are there that they can look? And do we want them to know they have to look for something that's blue? So maybe instead you refer to blue in other ways. Think of things that are blue. Refer to the sky. or refer to earth and sky and let them figure out which one you're thinking. Or mention someone, let's say there's someone that everyone knows that has blue eyes. So refer to that person. It's some way to get them to figure out that, wait, this person's not thinking about sky, they're not thinking about eyes, they're thinking about the color blue. And then that gets them there. A later clue, you're going to want to really tell them about blue. That's what you have to do. I've always told people I could hide the medallion in your own home, and I'll give you a week, you won't find it. Now they laugh at it, but that's true, because I could find something. I always use an example. Let's say you have, I hide it on a shelf. Maybe it's a bookshelf. Well, I'm not going to say books. I'm not going to say shelf. What am I going to do? I'm going to grab a book. And it might be a book on this shelf, and I've hid it down on this shelf. But I'm going to refer to perhaps the title of the book. I'm going to refer to the author of the book. You already know I'm talking about a book, but just a title or a person. You then have to eventually figure out I'm talking about a book, and then know it's in the bookshelf. Then you got to figure out what shelf it's going to be on, behind what book, and that's how you release it. You may start with a clue that even gets them the fact that it's in the living room, or if the living room's on the main floor, get them to think main floor first. You don't tell them bookshelf first. You tell them main floor first. Then you tell them living room. Then you tell them bookshelf, and you tell them what shelf it's on.